afternoon, everybody. I hope we're all doing well. It's a Monday afternoon where I am. It's very dreary. It's very autumny. It's very like autumn. It's not quite winter. We've still been having 26, 27-degree days. So I am not complaining about the sort of weather I'm getting at the minute, but it is getting a little bit chilly in the mornings and at night. Anyway, I thought I'd hop online and do this thing that I said I was going to do, this particular thing on criminology and Cesare Lombroso. Sorry. Shut up. Oh my God. Okay, and so it begins. I'm not going to be able to shut her up. Before I start, I'm just going to preface this vlog installment with a disclaimer. As I've said before, I'm quite literally a nobody. And whenever you're getting told not to do your own research or not to listen to people doing their own research, I am the exact type of person that they're referring to, all right? And I'll tell you why. Because I'm about to cherry pick bits and pieces of academic literature, and I'm going to contort it for a biased narrative, because obviously I'm the only person that does that, right? But I do it because I can, and I don't have a university lecturer, behind me telling me what's right and wrong, and I don't have to submit anything I do for peer review. So, I can. But on that note, never take information that comes from the internet unless it's from an expert, not gospel, but, listen to the experts. I'm just a nobody. Right, now that I've paid due obeisance to expertise, I think I can continue with a clear conscience. So today I thought I'd be talking about criminology, but more precisely, and especially when I get to Lombroso, it's actually going to be anthropological criminology. But it doesn't change the field's foundations, nor does it negate a past that's now intersecting with modern day techniques of identification and policing. It's just that since I began thinking about the topic, you learn as you go, and you're reading and you have to tweak. And if you don't do that, well, obviously everything you do is just going to be wrong, okay, as you come across new information. I had to do that a lot here with this subject. And I realized that I bit off a lot more than I could chew. So I'm really, really going to do my best. It's profoundly interesting, but, grain of salt with everything. So what is criminology, broadly speaking? It is simply a social science, and it's literally the who, what, when, where, how, and why of crime. For social science, it's incredibly dense and interesting. There is nothing at all soft about this particular social science. In the past, it's been known to dabble in the supernatural, the demonological, and the metaphysical. And I can actually see why a cerebral person like Brian Koberger would have been drawn to it to begin with. It studies the criminal and criminality, the causes of crime like the social environment, the effects of crime like broken window theory. It delves into prevention, policing, rehabilitation, and both the justice and penal systems. So it's an incredibly data-rich well from which to mine, and mine from it they do. The origins of criminology would outdate any formalization of the field. Civilizations would have always sought to identify and control individuals or groups perceived as harming the majority for not adhering to important social norms, and even before rules were codified. As society became more structured and complex, logically it follows that so too did the controls on deviance. Deviant, degenerate, reprobate. These words all harken back to a classical idea of humanity's innate sinfulness, the fall of man and original sin, the born criminal. Atavism, or atavistic, is a word rooted in ancestry and biology, and that was then appropriated by Lombroso to convey the criminal type as essentially being an evolutionary throwback. I did finally finish L'uomo delinquente by Cesare Lombroso, which translates to the criminal man. And just quickly, let me say what a hoot that book was. I will probably go back and read it even more thoroughly. But I mean, I tried to find out if this book's still being used in university campuses on the syllabus, and I think it might be. And I would just love to see the average Gen Z's reaction when they read about Lombroso's ideas on homosexuality, on race, on women. Like they must be just having conniptions all over the shop, because I mean it's most of it, a lot of it has been debunked, but it's still a foundational text, and for good reason. Anyway, I found it interesting. If you're going to read it, I suggest you also read his daughter's Gina. He had a daughter called Gina, and she's done a summary of his work as well. And the way she writes it out, and it's just in a more sort of digestible way. Okay, so if you start with her or if you start with him, either way, it's all good. It's very interesting. So yes, who was Lombroso? Well, he was a psychiatrist. He was a phrenologist and a eugenicist, and he was actually one of the earliest pioneers of polygraph technology. His device was called a hydrosmigmograph. And he also used something called plethysmograph. So yeah, he was a pioneer in that stuff too, in lie detection. You know, some of us think we can just tell when someone's lying, but he was one of the first people to get the gadgets to actually formalize the science. It's never really been formalized, has it? Anyway, he believed you could identify the criminal type by metrics: skull size, elongated arms, how deeply set the eyes were, the thickness of one's lips, prognathism of the jaw, if they had handle-shaped ears like a chimpanzee. And get this, when I read this, I couldn't believe it. But anyway, he believed bushy eyebrows were a common trait amongst the violators of women. And then I realised that he's Italian and he was in Italy, so it's really not that remarkable. But yeah, the whole bushy eyebrow thing really jumped out at me. What else? A person's handwriting, their left-handedness, prehensile feet, their speech and slang, tattoos and pain thresholds, even the size of one's genitalia. Yes. He also has a whole sort of thesis section specifically for the female criminal, and some very interesting statistics on prostitution. So yeah, like I said, the Gen Z students would be having conniptions. But anyway, these are all stigmata of the atavistic man, a primitive savage, because they were an evolutionary regression born out at birth. I actually found his thoughts on brachycephaly and epilepsy quite interesting, because I happen to have a brachycephalic epileptic canine, and he's an absolute menace with my bitches. Like, he is a nuisance. He is constantly trying to hump them. So I couldn't help but think that Lombroso might have been onto something there. She obviously can see something out the window. This one of the bitches, not the nuisance. But yeah, even anecdotally, which is all Lombroso's work was in the end, because he didn't have a proper control group, if you squeeze a brain into a cranium that isn't large enough, right, due to poor breeding, that causes all sorts of issues for animals like syringomyelia, anyone with a pug, a cavalier, bulldogs, what else? Boxers. They might actually know what that word means firsthand. And it can manifest in humans too, Chiari malformation and other congenital issues. So that brings us to breeding. And I only say breeding because I was talking about dogs just then. But yeah, it brings us to breeding, genes and hereditary, which today in criminology they're calling epigenetics. It seems to be having more of an influence in modern day criminology. So I've come away with the understanding that epigenetics or gene expressions, they're not set in stone as such and can change. But it doesn't really stop the traits getting passed on, does it, in the first place? If you have a person with a genetic predisposition and then you put them in a negative environment, you may have a rather difficult character to deal with, right? Stands to reason. The language is often couched in a lot of PC verbiage, but ultimately they're inherited traits and environmental factors. So nuance or not, it is what it is. It is what it is, and there's no point being too touchy about the whole thing. Right, so why is all of this stuff worth talking about? And more importantly, how does it intersect with modern day policing? Like I said before. Well, to understand our present situation, we need to sort of trace the path that we've walked, right? Much like etymology, we use words every day without understanding their roots. So if you dig into the roots of some words and their origin stories, you'd better get a better cultural understanding of how we ended up where we are now. Same goes for this particular field of criminology. In my opinion, in Western societies at least, not much has changed regarding our views on humans. You either sort of prescribe to an original sin, innate, degenerate narrative, or we're just a hair's breadth away from being a savage. Maybe Eastern belief systems do it better, and if you go listen to Sam Harris, he'll gladly nourish you in that particular area. Now, even though social Darwinism has been thoroughly debunked, we went from a eugenicist's rudimentary skull measurements and observations to AI systems tracking our precise biometrics at airports, supermarkets, hardware stores, city centres. Tech companies use this data for device security. Government agencies taking biometric voice prints to verify your identity. And of course, my favourite, we have companies compiling massive databases of DNA mapping out all of humanity's family tree, to which the government helps itself when it deems necessary, right? So, like I said in the beginning, criminology is the who, what, where, is the who, what, when, where, how, and why of crime. But it's really a study of human behaviour, who we are, and what makes us tick. So that's a lot of information. And considering the copious amounts of legislation getting passed, it is becoming easier to fall afoul of some government mandate. We're all being sort of criminalised and surveilled in one way or another. You ask any Eastern European that remembers the omnipotent bureaucracy Lombroso was so fond of, and they'll recite a well-known line, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime." Lombroso would have been giving authorities major props with our advances in identifying people, and you can bet A eugenicist would be applying the tech liberally. If you can pinpoint a criminal before birth, wouldn't society have a moral obligation to safeguard the majority from that bad seed? So, criminology has obviously come a long way since Lombroso. I scoured YouTube for some really good quality information because there was no way I was going to wade into the sea of academic papers online. I just wasn't going to put myself through that. But I did come across one professor. Her name was Gwen Adshed, and she was doing a talk about 8 years ago at Gresham College. And if you'd like some thoughts by a real expert on the topic, I'm going to put the link in the thingy below so you can. I sifted through a lot, and she was actually very, very good to listen to. So suffice to say, criminology really is an all-encompassing topic, and we all get dragged into it. It's wide net. It casts a very wide net, and we all get dragged into it. It's probably worthwhile paying attention to. But don't get too carried away, because I hear that they've been locking up the neurologically divergent criminology PhDs. So it might actually end up being bad for your health. I really wasn't expecting the whole bushy eyebrows in that book, eh? Anyway, if you've made it this far, nice to see you again. Thanks for coming. Like, subscribe. I hope this wasn't misinformative. I really hope it wasn't. I did try. Have a lovely rest of your day, whatever you're doing. Bye.